Abarigani, Salam, Islam, Hetepu. This is Chief Noble Bandele Elamin. The lecture on topic today will be the Moors in America around the colonial times. We'll also discuss the indigenous Moors who were here before Columbus. And we will also look at the differences between a so-called Negro and the status of a Moor. What were the differences between the two? So, let's start first with Moors in America before Columbus. Of course, there were Moors here in America before Columbus. When Columbus actually got here, the first Americans were called Indians by Christopher Columbus. Well, we also understand Indians is coming from the word indigo. Indigo meaning the blue blacks. So there are people, that are blue blacks, or that are so dark that they're blue. So looking at that, it's also looking at Avatar. When you look at the movie Avatar, you got blue, black, or blue hue beings that are the indigenous to the land. So, understanding that Moors have been traveling from Africa, or so misnomer Africa, from the motherland, traveling from the motherland to the Americas long before Christopher Columbus. This is evident when Christopher Columbus came here. He was met with dark-skinned natives. But the fact that Moors for hundreds of years, thousands of years, had been seafarers, and that they were capable of traveling to America. You understand that Moors controlled the high seas even from 711 to around the 1800s of AD. That Barbary tribes were even giving Moors, money for tribute. So the fact that the ships would have been seaworthy of travel, and that this is able to show that African people would have quite by no mistake been able to travel to America. You have the different paths of water that are particular currents that travel off the coastlines of Africa straight to Americas. So it was not something new to the motherland African continent. But when you look also at the dark-skinned people in America, it's also, we're talking about the indigenous, or what they call Washita, Yamasees, those type of Moors, those Washita indigenous Moors, they are indigenous to the land before even the Mongoloid or type phenotype coming in through the Bering Strait and whatnot. A lot of the Washita, indigenous dark people were already here. The Washita are said to derive their name from the Washita River, which flows out somewhere in Oklahoma. But the Washita are descendants of the Olmec, and they are Malian. We have Malian Moors who came here and mixed with Olmecs. And you got the Washita and those phenotype. The word Washaw means dark skin. Okay. Other natives around there that are dark was the Chawasha, which you got Chawasha, you got Choctaw, you got Chickasaw, all those type names. Those people were dark skinned. The Chasha, you see, and Washita, they are people who lived in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. You got, and so then you got those. Then you also have the on the West Coast. You have dark skinned people living over there, and then you have in the East Coast. You got the Iroquois and all them who were dark skinned living on the East Coast. So you had dark skinned people really all over the United States. So what is known as the U.S. today, all across the continent. You look at the Moors from the continent of Africa, or what we know misnomer Africa. You'll find that Moors were a major influence in the world from around 711 to around the 1800s. They had a major influence in Europe. The influence on Europe would be invaluable. You look at what I call Moorish science. The influence of Moorish science around the globe for Europe was that in the time of 711, that was around the time that Europe was in a dark age. So what you find is that around 711, the Moors come out of North Africa through Strait of Gibraltar, through Morocco. They came through and they conquered Spain. The Moors had retained a lot of the ancient knowledge, and the knowledge created for these Europeans, it created mathematics again. It created new sailing techniques because the Moors were, like we said, seafarers. It created humanist thinking, philosophy. It created masonry. It created the Knights Templar. It created Gnostics. Even the Illuminati itself was formed out of Moorish science in regards to Moors. Moors were only the custodians of ancient knowledge that had been put together by the ancient people. You look at Knights Templars started their organization out of the Alexar, or the temple that was built by Saladin. That was the Dome of the Rock. The Knights Templar studied in the temple. There was no temple. Solomon's temple, the second temple of the Jews, did no longer stand. The Muslims built the Dome of the Rock before the Knights Templars were there, before they existed. So they went to Solomon's temple, theoretically, only by the permission of the Muslims. So the Knights Templars' knowledge comes out of the wisdom that was captured and had been obtained and maintained by the Arabic language and the Moors, and their higher ability to learn on science and technology. They studied science, astronomy, astrology, mathematics. They studied various subjects that had been lost to the Europeans. So when you look at that, you also look at what we call the Barbary Treaties. The Barbary Treaties Barbary meaning Berber or dark-skinned people. The Barbary treaties were one of the main treaties was the Moorish Treaty of Peace and Friendship that was created to make peace between the Moors and the United States Republic. By the 1800s, you got to understand that Moorish rule had been fading, and that the treaty was to help to have a better relationship with European nations. The U.S. benefited from this friendship. Okay, so what's happening is that between 711 and 1800, Moors had a height, and by 1492, the Moors began to start losing power in the region due to the defeat of their loss in Spain. Spain was a major foothold. After that time, they were in decline, but yet still had heavy influence on the world. So, but by the time the 1700s come around, you have the United States or American and different European nations who had come over to this other land now called America. They had come to this land and began to start they began to take power and control over the lands. And so it comes to a point where they see the power of the Europeans and they see their time coming. So one of the things was the Barbary Treaty. The Barbary Treaty was also dealing with how much money Moors would get each year from these Europeans to allow them to have free trade or free sales, for them to have the ability to sail across the ocean without interference from any Moorish country or whatever Moorish treaty, whatever country that the treaty was drafted in, they would have peace and friendship with. Well, it gets to a point where the Moors no longer have the might to even to maintain these Barbary tributes, as they call them. The Barbary tribute is when the European nation would give so much money each year to the Moors. So what happens is, as you feel a decline, the Moors in Morocco create a treaty. They get the Sultan of Morocco to form the treaty. This treaty was to help have a better relationship with the European nations, and the U.S. will also benefit from it because of the friendship and the weight that the Moors actually still carried in the world. It allowed American Europeans to set up their corporate nation states on the land, sort of like a land grant. But it also gave more sovereigns recognition that America was independent from Britain. It was one of the first of the people to recognize the U.S. as independent. This helped introduce the Moors to, the Moors helped the U.S. to the world stage. What is the difference between a black and a Moor or an indigenous? Well, a black has no real connection to indigenous land or Africa for that matter anymore. A black is just a person who has no nationality as far as they're concerned. And this is shown that this is true, that blacks really had no protection under the U.S. Constitution. Free blacks had no protection under the U.S. Constitution. So even if you were free, you still were not protected under the Constitution. All that meant was that you could not be forced to do work. You were not forced into involuntary servitude. That's what that meant. But that did not mean that you were protected under the U.S. Constitution. Free blacks were governed. They were governed under what they call black codes. slaves were governed under slave codes. Their legal status, they were a non-U.S. citizen. They had no legal standing. Okay. That was actually made into existence on paper for a for the final word, as you will, by looking at the Dred Scott case, where it basically said that blacks lacked nationality and therefore cannot be a citizen. Now, because of that, the status of black left you with very, 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 very limited legal remedies. Now, what made a difference? What is the difference between the black, him not having any rights, and a so-called Moor in your 1700? If you're looking at late 1700s, like 1780, in the 80s, 1780s, you'll find that Moors were distinctly, they were distinct from a black. They were not the same as black. When you look at the Journal of House of Representatives in 1789 to 1790, it is found that in the subjects of Morocco, there were 4 Moors that were captured by an African king. And I say African king, this is what it says in the statement. If you look at the Journal of House of Representatives, 1789, you'll find that it says, subjects of Morocco and 4 Moors were captured by an African king. It didn't say a Moorish king, as many say that it was the Moors that enslaved us. But African kings also played a part in the slave trade by selling out their own fellow tribes. But anyway, it says that the African king and it delivered the slave merchant who sold them into slavery in South Carolina. It says that they bought their freedom, and their petition for South Carolina was to clarify their legal status. So those African Moors realized that they had protection under the Treaty of Peace and Friendship by claiming their Moorish descendant or Moorish nationality. If they were able to claim themselves Moorish, that would allow them to be treated different because of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship allows Moors to be here in the states and be treated equal. Now, in the Journal of House of Representatives, it makes the mention that if any Moor commits a crime, forbid that he does commit a crime, that he would be treated equal to a citizen of the state and not subject to the Negro Act. So there was a distinction between a Moor and a Negro. A Moor and a Negro were not one of the same. Why is the Constitution important? Because of Article 6, Section 2 in the Constitution, where it makes the statement that all treaties are the highest law of the land, or there's a supreme law of the land, and that all judges would have to adhere by that treaty. So the treaty becomes the actual law. And so dealing with the treaty, it would have freed many of those people who consider themselves black if they had understood the facts. So I hope short. We'll have short ones like this, but this is part one of the Moorish breakdown, New Kemet style. I will catch you on the next clip. I appreciate you for watching. Asante Sana. And that would be all. Tuta Nana.